All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the final day of the First Coast Worksite Wellness Conference. I'm Cassie Bruce, the chair of the council, and I speak on behalf of the board that we are so excited that you're here for the last day of our conference. We've had a week filled with inspiring, thought-provoking speakers, and yesterday was just so much fun honoring and celebrating you all with the Healthiest Companies Awards luncheon. And today we're excited to end it all with another awesome national level speaker, Dr. Saundra Dalton-Smith. And we're just going to jump into it right away. We're not beating around the bush today. So by now, you all probably know how to use Remo. You can network when we're back on the ballroom floor by leaving your video and microphone on. We will leave it open again for a few minutes after the presentation today so that you can continue your conversations. And then when you're in this mode, we can interact through the chat. So remember to enter all of your questions into the Q&A box and enter any general chat conversation like you're doing now in the chat box. So in the chat right now, let's get it all warmed up. If you would type in a high note from this week. It can be related to the conference or just a high note, something that went really well for you this week. Networking, Ebony says, it is nice to see each other again. Dancing with Billy Blanks, that's awesome. Meeting amazing people, Jen Arnold did awesome. Dance party, seeing everyone's faces, Billy Blanks' energy. If we could all have a dose of that, I think the world would be a better place. Networking, all of it, awesome. Thank you guys so much. So let's jump into it. Positivity, networking, perfect. Billy's genuine understanding of people, that was really neat. All right, so I would like to invite Vicki Roy, the council's secretary, to the stage to introduce our speaker for today. Oh wait, actually, before that, Vicki, I messed it up. First, we need to hear from our title sponsor. Florida Blue has another great video for us. So I'll play that first, and then Vicki will introduce our speaker.
Hi everyone, hope you all are having a wonderful day. I'm Juan Simons and I'm part of the well-being team at Florida Blue GuideWell, and I'm happy to be here with you all today. I've been with Florida Blue a little over 10 years, and in that time I've seen our program transform from one focused solely on the physical and mental aspects of well-being to one that incorporates a holistic approach, embracing the diverse needs of our employees. This means recognizing that everyone is at a different stage in their well-being journey, and what works for one person may not work for another. For example, the needs of an individual who's just entering the workforce may be very different than those of an employee approaching retirement. With that in mind, we've created a program for our employees that offers everything from health-related webinars and financial health assessments to self-guided programs within our online health incentive platform. Employees also have the opportunity to earn dollars towards their HSA or FSA through volunteer work and by completing preventive screenings. We've learned this past year what it means to really listen to our employees and to provide resources and programming that's relevant. Realizing the new landscape we found ourselves in, we delivered resources consisting of articles, podcasts, webinars, tip sheets, and other helpful tools for coping during the pandemic. We also provided remote fitness and stress management apps to help our employees continue their well-being journey. These are just some of the reasons I'm proud to be a part of the team. Of course, none of this would be possible without program manager Tracy Gallo, our volunteer army of Live Well champions, our friends on the Better You Strides and On Life Health teams, the support of Florida Blue leadership, and of course, our employees. All of you helped shape the program into what it is today. I'd like to also extend a huge thanks to the First Coast Worksite Wellness Council for putting together another amazing event, and to all the conference attendees who continue to cultivate connections and inspire within their own organizations and communities. You all are doing truly meaningful work. Thanks again. Wishing you all an amazing day.
All right, thank you again, Florida Blue, and thanks for sharing a little bit about your program too. That's really insightful. All right, Vicki, now you can come to the stage and introduce our speaker for today.
Thanks, Cassie. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the last day of the First Coast Worksite Wellness Council Conference. I hope all of you have enjoyed the conference as much as I have. My name is Vicki Roy. It is my sincere privilege to introduce Dr. Saundra Dalton-Smith. Dr. Saundra is a board-certified internal medicine physician, speaker, and author. She is an international wellness expert featured in numerous media outlets, including Prevention, MSNBC, Women's Day, Fox, Psychology Today, and has appeared as a guest on the Dr. Oz Show. She is the author of numerous books, including her newest book, Sacred Rest. Recover your life, renew your energy, restore your sanity. Sacred Rest includes groundbreaking insight on the 7 types of rest needed to optimize your productivity, increase your overall happiness, overcome burnout, and live your best life. Over 100,000 people, including myself, have discovered their personal rest deficits using her free assessment at restquiz.com. Welcome, Dr. Saundra.
Thank you, Vicki. So excited to join everyone. I want to dive right in with really the core of why I even discussed this topic and how Vicki even found out about me. About 10 years ago now, I got to a point in my life where I was actively in practice. I'm a board certified internal medicine physician. So I've been in healthcare for a number of years and had assumed that because of that particular role, that burnout was just part of the history. It's just how you live when you work in certain environments. And what happened with that is I got to a level of burnout where I wasn't just laying around and feeling as if I didn't enjoy my job. I could tell it was actually affecting how well I did my job. I was producing, but I wasn't producing at my highest capacity. And this is what I find with a lot of people and within a lot of companies. We have a lot of folks that are functionally burned out. They are still showing up at work every day. They're not absentee, they're present, but they're present pouring out from their emptiness. They're exhausted. They no longer find joy in the work that they're doing. They have a difficult time providing high quality customer service because really they're not in a good place themselves. And it's hard to pour from an empty cup. And so when I started looking at how do I even get from this place that I feel so drained and so exhausted to a place where I'm not only enjoying my job again, but I'm actually pouring from a good place. I want to be creative. I want to be innovative. I want to go the extra mile because I'm seeing purpose align with my energy. And that took me through looking at a lot of different things. And the very first thing that it brought me to was this whole concept of stress management, because some careers are just intrinsically stressful. And so I needed to figure out, how do I manage stress? And this is what I found out. You cannot manage stress. We have so kind of created this atmosphere for people where we talk about something that is not possible to really do. Stress really is just managing the way we address change, how we address challenges. And so those changes and challenges, we can't really adjust to them the same way we would, let's say, our bank accounts. We can't just say, oh, well, I'm going to pick this much stress that I'm going to have on this day, and I'm going to choose this much stress per day. And you're going to pick and choose, take a little bit, give a little bit back based on what you want to deal with in that day. If 2020 showed us anything, there are some stressors that come that you have no control over. So I needed to switch my focus from looking at stress management to actually, how do I build resilience? Because that's what I wanted. I wanted to be able to have the stress, have the challenge, have those changes come, and be able to not just bounce back, but to grow and to actually build up some inner strength. And so that's what I want to talk with you about today. The power of resilience. What is it? How do we get more of it? And how do we deal with the stressors and the challenges that come in our personal and professional lives? Because that's what's required to really cultivate healthy leaders and healthy teams. Because we can give them all great information, but if they don't have the capacity to take that information and then to grow and to develop, then we're really not getting to the place that we want. And so I want to start with just identifying how we look at the entire process of resilience. It started with this statement by Dr. Jack Ropel from the Johnson & Johnson Human Performance Institute. He puts it this way: the key is to recognize that you will never eliminate stress from your life. Instead, create regular opportunities for your body to recover from stress, just as you would rest your muscles between weightlifting repetitions. Stress is the stimulus for growth, and recovery is when the growth occurs. That is how we build the resilience muscle. And so when you look at it, I want you to start thinking about it differently. Stop thinking about stress management. Challenges and changes will come. You don't have to seek them out, and you can't determine how much of them you are going to receive. They're just going to come. There are going to be acquisitions and mergers. There are going to be employees that are new hirees, and they're going to be under more stress. There are going to be those people who are moving from one position to a higher level of leadership with more responsibility, which is another type of stress. So stress happens. Change happens. Not all change is good. Not all change is bad. But whether the change is good or bad, your body still experiences a stress response from it. And so we can't control the stress, but we can control how we rest, because the rest is when we actually recover. The rest is when we do those restorative things that help us to build up the resilience that we're desiring, to build up that inner strength that we're wanting. And so I want you from this point forward, when you start thinking about your resilience level, think about the stress plus the rest. What are the stressors, the challenges that you're experiencing? And then what is your restful restorative response that you're going to do to counteract that? And so that's where I've been spending the majority of my time with my research, is looking at these types of rest. Because the number one thing that I found when I started asking people about their stress level, and they started telling me things like, I'm so tired, I'm so exhausted, I started having them answer this question: what kind of tired are you? And so if you're right now are feeling the same way, you're on day 4 of a conference, sometimes that in itself can feel like there's so much great information. I want you to start thinking about, what kind of tired are you? If you are feeling exhausted, fatigued, burned out in any way, start looking at the place where you are having the greatest deficit, the greatest rest deficit, where you're not pouring back into a place where you are daily pouring out, where you're using energy that you're not restoring. Because that is the key to actually managing these different feelings that we have, to not allowing stress to be able to lead you too far into burnout, and to start building back up that resilience. So I'm going to spend the rest of our time together. We're going to walk through these 7 types of rest. We're going to discuss what they are, what it looks like if you have a rest deficit, and I'm going to give for each of these just a couple of tips on how to get more rest in each of these areas. And I want to start off with physical rest, because I think that is the place we have to begin, because of the misconceptions that we've attached to physical rest. When I talk about rest, sometimes the very first thing people think I'm going to be sharing is about sleep. Well, sleep and rest are not the same thing. Sleep actually is just one type of rest. It is a type of physical rest. And you can see, if you put all of your energy in trying to get more sleep without addressing any of these other types of rest, you're omitting 6 of the 7. And even with sleep, sleep is only half of the physical rest equation. Physical rest is divided up into passive, which is sleeping and napping, those things that you do passively. And then there's also a component of physical rest called active physical rest. These are the things that you do to help restore the circulation, that help improve your lymphatics, that help your body to feel less tense and the muscles not be so tight. So you have to look at both sides of physical rest to see which one that you may be deficient in. Now, if you have a physical rest deficit, some of the things you may experience could be things like muscle aches and pain. You may notice that you're having swelling in your legs after being at your desk for long periods of time. You may find that you have to drink caffeine or something sugary to kind of rev yourself up in the morning or midday. Or you may find that you're having to drink a bottle or a glass of wine in the evening to wind yourself down. Your physical body is fighting you when you're trying to go into that restful place. And so I want you to, don't get me wrong, sleep is highly important. But this is the thing. Most of us are not actually getting high quality sleep because our body cannot get to a rested state in one of these 7 areas. If your mind can't get to a peaceful and restful place, if your senses can't get there, and if your emotions can't get there, then you can go to bed 12 hours early and try to sleep all night long, but you're not going to be able to get the high quality non-REM stage 3 and 4 sleep where the restoration actually occurs. So sleep is important, but rest is often the bridge that takes us into the high quality sleep that we desire. So let's take a look at some of the active physical rest type things that you can do. And one of them is simply stretching. We take for advantage really the effect that so many of the things that we do in our day have on our physical body. If you're sitting at a desk or if you have employees that are at their desk for long periods of time, one of the number one things that we see coming into medical practices is back and neck pain. And so most people are not aware of really the body ergonomics of the workstations where they're at. There are some very simple things that can be done to improve this and actually can give people years of relief from not having back pain just by doing some simple tactics. And I'm going to share a few of those with you. If you notice that after a long day of doing Zoom calls and doing things at work where you're on your computer, you start having more pain in your upper neck and back area, I want you to start thinking about the positioning of your screens. Oftentimes, particularly if someone's using a laptop where they're moving it from one room or to another room, and they're going back and forth from home to work, sometimes the positioning of that screen actually has their neck looking downward. Now, the problem with that is your cervical spine curves the opposite direction. So if I'm looking downward, I'm actually pulling that cervical spine, the neck spine, backwards, which then straightens it out, which then leads to 80% of the reasons people have back pain. Simple solution, adjusting the height of the screen. Right now, my screen's on a couple of books because I need it high enough so that I'm not looking down, but I'm looking straight. Sometimes even having an external screen so that you can just plug it into your iPad or your computer or whatever it is you're using, and then it casts out to screens that have your eye positioning with your neck properly aligned. Here's another one. Often have women come in saying, why do I have these varicose veins? I don't cross my legs. Why do I keep getting them? And it's not hereditary for these particular women. What I'm finding is most of them are sitting in chairs that improperly push up against the back of their leg. Right now, wherever you're sitting at watching this, do you feel the chair pushing back on the back of your thigh and leg area? If so, that's a problem. Simple solution. A small little, I call it a razor, but it's really just this little block that goes up under your legs. They sell it on Amazon for super cheap. They have all kind of cute versions of it so you can get it to match your decor. It raises your feet up just a little bit. It's a stool that your foot just sits upon. It relieves the pressure. It takes those veins and arteries that are being collapsed and gives them circulation all over again. Improves leg cramps, improves leg swelling, and will help prevent you from having varicose and spiral veins later on in the future from having all that pressure on the back of your legs. Great, simple solutions that you can add in the middle of your busy day that didn't require you any extra time. That's what I want you to recognize. A lot of these things I'm going to share with you do not require you to go on vacation, do not require you to quit your job, do not require you to find some extra time and add some extra things to your to-do list. Most of them are things that are going to be incorporated in the middle of your busy day, in the middle of all the stuff, all the responsibilities, all the things you have to do. You can implant some self-care strategies that do not cost you anything other than being intentional. That is going to be the key word to actually getting to a place of restoration and getting to a place where you can manage stress and change well, is being very intentional about replacing and restoring the energy that you're losing. Now, I want to give you another example of this. One of the main areas that people struggle with is clearing their mind. And I'm going to try to help you visualize this in a way that maybe can help you see why this is such a struggle. Mental rest deficits, if you've experienced this, if you've ever walked into a grocery store and you have 3 items that you're going to get, and you get in the store and, who needs a list for 3 items, right? So you get in the store and you cannot remember that 3rd item to save your life. You have no clue what you went into that store for. Or you walk from the kitchen to the living room and you're like, why am I in this room? I don't know why I came in here. Also, you may be experiencing a mental rest deficit. If you're that person, you get up in the morning, you have to have the largest cup of coffee available just to get your brain to flick on so that you can actually start thinking clearly again and get all those synapses going. Now, this is another one that so many people struggle with. You lay down at night and you are exhausted, and there should be no reason why you haven't completely gone to sleep. But the second you close your eyes, you start thinking of everything that you need to do the next day. All the to-do lists pop up. Or you start thinking about the conversation you had earlier that day. Maybe your boss said something. Maybe an employee got mad. Maybe you fired somebody. Whatever it is, your head is going through all these conversations and ruminating over all of this. All of these are signs of a mental rest deficit. Now, this is the thing. Mental rest deficits are being perpetuated by our lifestyle. I'm going to ask you a question, and you may be on your best behavior today because you're in conference mode, but I want you to answer on your normal day. How many computer screen tabs are normally open on your computer at any given time on a normal day? And put that in the chat. Now, when I ask this question, depending on your field, oftentimes determines how many tabs are normally open. When I ask these of people who are, in a clerical work, they may say 5 or 6. If I ask someone who is in medicine, they may say about 10 or so. If I ask someone in IT, the largest number I ever received was 55. I didn't even know a computer could have 55 tabs open and not shut down. Mine would not have that much memory to hold 55 tabs. But this is the thing. The same way we are multitasking on our laptops is the same process that's going on in your brain. When you try to lay down at night, it's as if you have all these mental tabs open. And the same way we refuse to close what we're not using is the same thing that we have going on in our headspace. All these tabs are open at one time in our brain. And so you lay down and try to go to sleep, and you have these things running in the background. And you're jumping from one thought to another thought, and you can't go to sleep. Now, a simple way of trying to downgrade some of that would be something we call brain dumping. It's basically letting the brain release the information, because the way the thought process works, when your brain is ruminating over information, whether it's a to-do list, a feeling, an emotion, a worry, whatever it is, when it's ruminating over it, it goes into the same mode that it did when you were in grade school. Your ruminations was a sign that this is something we have to remember. It's almost like studying for a test. So your brain is hot wired to say, if they're thinking about it that much, I need to hold on to it. And it will hold on to that information even at the expense of you going to sleep. So what brain dumping does is have a piece of paper, notepad, a Post-it note. If you want to get fancy, you can get a journal. Some people even put this on their phone. Now, I got to tell you, that is not my favorite way of addressing this, because when you pick up your phone, bad things tend to happen. You start looking at everything else. But if you can go into the notes sections, rattle it off real quick, and actually put the phone down, that works too. Because by depositing that information that you're ruminating over onto something concrete, what happens is it allows your brain to release it. It now does not feel responsible for holding on to that information, and you can then go into deeper levels of sleep. This also works for emotional ruminations. So if you have a tendency to be a bit of a kind of self-evaluator, we'll call it, and something happens and then you're evaluating things over and over again. Some people call it worrying. Some people call it just, I'm a deep thinker, whatever you want to call it. It's best to write some of that down as well, You don't have to write down, let's say if a conversation happened that made you feel a certain way, someone questioned something or corrected you, or you got some criticism in some way. Don't write down what they said. Write down what they said, how it made you feel. Not their actual statement, but how their statement made you feel. Because that's really what the rumination's about. The rumination's about what they said, the feelings it produced inside of you. So write that down. And then you're able to release it. It's another way of brain dumping so that you can go into deeper levels of sleep. Because at that point, you can readdress that feeling later, but trying to address it on an exhausted body, mind, and spirit is not going to end up in a good solution. So you get it down where you can address it at a time when you feel ready. Now, another part of mental rest is the ability to actually be mindful and present in the moment. This can be very difficult for people, especially if you're someone who has a tendency to take your work home with you. And so if you find that, let's say you're at your kid's soccer game and you're thinking about work and you really want to be present for the soccer game, you can try a simple tactic called a mental word chair. And so the way a mental word chair works is that you basically have a word that is going to be your focus word. Now, if you've ever had a 5-year-old, then you know if you tell a 5-year-old, sit here in this chair, I'm going to be back in a few minutes. You leave, you come back 10 minutes later, that 5-year-old is no longer in that chair, right? They're bouncing off the walls. They're not in the chair. Well, your brain works the same way. It's not going to just stay in that mental word chair just because you said go there. You have to discipline the child. You tell them, no, come back, sit in this chair. And so the child comes back and obeys and sits in the chair. So if you're at that soccer game, you start thinking about your to-do list, your work list, you're going over clients. What you do is the mental word that you're going to focus on. And in this case, we'll say it's your child's name. You would think your child's name to sit your brain back into that word. And then the next, you're watching the game now, you're present at the moment. The next time your brain tries to run down the rabbit hole, you're going to speak that word in your mind again and discipline your brain to come back into focus on what it is you want it to focus on, so that you're not allowing it to just go down whichever path that it decides to go. You are showing it how to be mindful and how to stay in the moment by having a word that you will sit your thoughts in to keep into that place and stay present. Now, the next type of rest I want us to look at is sensory rest. Now, sensory rest takes into effect all of the senses that you experience. And, you know, many times we're not really aware of how much sensory input we receive within our day. Everything from the lights to the sounds to the smells that happen to be within your workplace. And what happens is we get so much sensory input, especially with the number of electronics and gadgets that some professions use, that it's easy to become sensory overloaded. Now, with sensory overload, what we see is that the body responds to that. Sensory overload actually activates oftentimes our fight or flight response. And so that increased cortisol and endorphin levels adds to the feelings of anxiety and sometimes to the feelings of anger that you can see within some people. And so one of the things to keep in mind is when you're looking at sensory input, what are some ways that you can downgrade the sensory input even within jobs that have a tendency to be sensory rich? I'll give you an example. If your job requires you to be in front of a computer all day and you're doing things like Zoom calls, and Zoom calls, as we all know, can be very exhausting. This is the reason why they tend to be so exhausting. If we had the very same meeting in a conference room at our office, then everybody would be in this very same sensory setting. We would all be looking at the same colors on the wall. We would all be looking at the same chair and the same table. Only differences would just be the people in the room. Now, in our current virtual atmosphere that we're doing a lot of these calls in, when I look at a Zoom screen, we have multiple boxes. Within each box, we have its own sensory rich experience. So I'm looking into one person's box and I'm thinking, did they make up their bed today? And I'm looking at another person's box and I'm thinking, what book is that on the bookshelf? Do I have that book? And every box has its own colors and its own changes and all of these things that I'm evaluating. And so I went from a very controlled sensory setting within an office conference room to a very massive, rich sensory overload setting. So at the end of a 30-minute, hour-long Zoom conference call, I've had so much sensory input from all of these boxes that I feel overwhelmed, overloaded, and exhausted. Simple way to start solving that solution or that problem is to have every person on the call have a company provided background, virtual background, everybody with the same color. And we actually prefer it to be a color that is soothing and not toxic, so that everyone actually has the same sensory background, and we take out a lot of that extra sensory input by making the background at least the same. Another way of doing that would be whoever's talking is pinned on the screen as the main visual that you're seeing, so that we're not having everybody's box pop up and we have all of this sensory overload that's hitting us. Another area for sensory that we really need to be aware of is with our devices. Now, electronics, I have no issue with electronics, and I'm not going to tell you to get rid of your cell phones or anything like that, or your apps. But this is the thing, what we're finding is that most people have way too many notifications set on their phone. We're getting notifications from weather apps, from news apps, from social media, and all of those things are fine to use, but you should be the one controlling how you use them. Right now, what happens is if someone wants to contact you and you have your social media app sending you notifications, you could be in the middle of doing something very important. But the moment that happens on your phone, it's like an impulsiveness. You have to like quickly look and see. And what we're finding is that the same way, I'll give you a quick, well, I'll date myself here is what I'm going to actually end up doing. But when I first started medicine, we had this thing called a pager. Some of you are young and have no clue what I'm talking about. But it's this little box that you wore on your waist. And it wasn't a phone. You couldn't call anybody with it. All it did was show you a phone number. And so you had to go find a phone and call and ask what they needed. Well, as a physician, every time that thing went off, it meant somebody was somewhere in the hospital dying or about to die, or something horrible was about to happen. So when it went off, my heart rate shot up, my palms got sweaty. I just kind of like, oh, what's now? That's the very same response that we're seeing in people when their notifications go off. Those small cortisol releases throughout the day. And you wonder why we feel like we can't get control of our stress. We are actually carrying around little boxes of stress and allowing it to actually interrupt our day throughout the day, oftentimes with messages that are not important. I remember once being in a situation like that when I had my cell phone, and this is past the pagers, when they were texting me now whenever they had a problem. Went off when I was on call. I grabbed the cell phone out, and it was my friend letting me know on Facebook that she just got a pumpkin spice latte in July. And isn't that wonderful? I don't need that to set off my stress response. I'm happy for her pumpkin spice. I don't need the stress. So what I want you to do, I'm not telling you to turn off your social media, but I want you to get back control. You can choose when you go into those apps. They don't have to send you notifications. The same with the weather, the same with the news. If there is something severely important, we will get a national alert and it will come through on your text. If there is something that your family or your kids need, it will come through on your text or your phone. Those really are the only two notifications most of us need to have on all the time, the text and the phone. Because if someone really needed you, that's how they're going to contact you. It does not need to be through your different apps and social media accounts. So choose how you want to engage with those apps, how you want to engage with social media. Block off time when you do it at your own desire, but not allowing it to actually impede upon your rest and your peace by just chiming in whenever it decides it wants to. Now, the next types of rest I'm going to talk about are two that actually deal with people and how we engage with people and actually how people help to restore us. Now, whether you are an introvert or an extrovert may determine how much of each of these you need. Introverts may need a little bit more emotional rest. Extroverts may find that they need a little more social rest. So as I talk about the two of these, I'm going to talk about them separately at first, but you'll see how they merge together quite a bit because they both deal with people. Now, emotional rest is the rest that we experience when we allow ourselves to be very truthful and authentic about what we're feeling. There are many professions where there is a level of professional stress that has to do with expectations and that has to do with performance. And so not performance as if you're trying to be fake or phony, but performance in that there is an expectation that you live up to. And I'll use myself as the example. When I walk into an ICU and I'm talking with the nurse in a patient's family, there might be something going on that my normal personality would have something kind of funny to say to lighten the mood. Well, I might do that in certain situations if it's just me and another physician. Not that we're disrespecting the patient, it's a hard job, and we try to keep some levity just to keep going. But that is not going to be appropriate in that particular situation. So my normal personality that might have something like that to say would actually have to completely suppress all of that and keep moving forward. The same way is if I'm in a room with a patient where I want to burst out in tears about what's happening, the professional stress of not being able to do that is going to keep it in. So whether it's something joyful or something painful, there's a professional stress when you have to hold in your authentic feelings. And so you need to recognize that. And so when you leave that particular situation, you are needing places within your life where you can express yourself authentically. You need to have those people in your life where you can say, I'm not good. I'm not in a good place right now. I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I'm suicidal, whatever it may be. There needs to be someone in your life that you can share those type of deep feelings with. Another area that tends to get of concern here with emotional rest is when we are people who are what I call people pleasers. You don't want anybody to be mad at you. So you end up being the yes girl or yes guy. Someone needs a volunteer at their children's school. I'll help. Someone needs this, and they come ask you, and you're like, sure, I'll do it. And you say sure before you even check with your heart and your mind if that's even something you want to do. Your mouth says it because you want them to like you, or you want them not to be mad at you. And what we find is that when someone has this people-pleasing tendency, they tend to also have an emotional rest deficit because they're not being truthful about what their feelings are. They're not actually using their yes and their no's appropriately to align with their priorities and with their own wants and desires. And so emotional rest includes all of that. It's that authenticity, that ability to say, and even to be open and vulnerable enough to say, I'm not in a good place. COVID, one of the top areas that we saw that got a hit was emotional rest because people were scared. Rightfully so, right? There was a lot going on and a lot of unknowns, but people were scared and in their home, not able to get around the people who may have been their emotional rest person, the people that they would talk these things over with. They're in their homes with their kids, who they then are having performance stress because we don't want them to see that we're scared and we don't know how things are going to work and we don't know how they're going to get to school and we don't know, right? And so you have the performance stress of trying to act like it's all good. And so all of this led to a level of emotional stress that then kind of erupted in a lot of anger and fights and all sorts of different things that happened from many different areas. So we have to recognize the need of just being able to be truthful with someone. And I think one thing just to mention here is whether you do this with a trusted friend, a counselor, a therapist, a pastor, co-worker, I don't really care who you choose to do your emotional rest with. It could be with your journal, to be honest with you, but you can't keep all that stuff in. You don't have the capacity to hold that much toxicity. And so if you try to hold that much emotional toxicity and not being able to actually release it, it's just going to actually compress you, compound you, and actually eventually get you to a place where you shut down. Now, social rest. Social rest is the rest we experience when we allow ourselves to be around life-giving people. What we find is that most adults have fewer adult friends than ever. And this is long before COVID ever hit. We weren't hanging out with our buddies even before that, because most of the time we spend more energy with the people who need us and the people who are negatively pulling from our social energy. And we don't really spend that much time with the people who positively pour into our social energy. Now, this is the thing. The people who negatively pull from your social energy, it does not mean that they're negative people. They're actually the people you probably love the most. Your kids, your spouse, your elderly parents, the people who need you, who need things from you. Those are the people negatively pulling from your social energy. They're not negative people. It's just the nature of the relationship with you. Now, the question is, who are the people in your life who don't need anything from you, who you just enjoy spending time with? And they just enjoy spending time with you. We all need to have those positive, life-giving people who are pouring back into us, who aren't requesting anything from us. They just enjoy spending time in our presence. And the thing with social rest, particularly when we are not able to just socially gather as we have in the past, is that a huge component of this social rest is how we feel when we are in the presence of someone. So virtually being in the presence of someone includes things like video, having the camera on, being able to see the person. So I'll give myself as an example again here. As someone whose closest friends, who the people that I do life with, one's in California, I'm on the East Coast, and another one's in Canada. We haven't been able to be together in person, which we always do at least once every year for the past 10 years. Haven't been able to be together now for almost since COVID, almost 2 years. And so visually being able to see someone, hear their voice, and be able to see their facial expressions and their body movements, all of those things are part of the social rest experience. So next time that you actually get on a call with your friend, make it a video call. Make it where you can actually see each other and experience each other's presence, and you actually will get more out of it. Now, this is another thing with this. Within your teams and when you're working within your groups, within your office space, require everybody to turn their cameras on. I know some of the introverts just went, oh, turn the cameras on. It's necessary for people to feel connected. It's necessary for people to not feel alone. It's necessary for them to feel as if, okay, I'm okay, even if my hair is in a messy bun and my kids are walking around back or whatever it may be. We have to have a level of acceptance, and part of that is being seen. Now, that goes to this. Now, with social rest, what we also find within our personal lives is that many couples actually spend very little time face-to-face. Now, granted, most of us haven't been this face-to-face with our spouses in our moment. And I'm not saying that you have to get this close to each other, but we do need some face-to-face time. Because when you fell in love face-to-face. However, once we got married, then what happens? We're actually face to screen. We are no longer face-to-face with the person we're doing life with. And that can put a lot of strain on your professional life as well as your personal life. What happens is when we start looking more face to screen, and the only face-to-face time that we saw in the research that couples were actually spending together was when they were arguing. So the face-to-face time was fighting face-to-face time, and the face-to-screen time was the majority of their time in the living room together. Completely turn that. One way of starting to do this is simply by asking the question, how was your day? This is something that I actually recommend for so many different clients, and it's something that I recommend within a challenge that I did a while back when my book first came out. And I remember getting an email from a gentleman who hadn't read the book. His wife actually read the book, and got an email from this gentleman that says, you know, I don't know you, but I just have to thank you, because I had no clue how distant our relationship had come. We were like roommates. We were just kind of surviving life together with kids. He's like, but after like a week or two of us just actually asking the question, how's your day? And not letting each other get away with fine, good, okay, you know, those one word brush off answers, actually listening to each other, looking in each other's eyes, reconnecting again. He's like, I think I just fell in love with my wife over one question. This is how simple some of these things are. You fall in love face to face. You cannot then decide that their only face to face time is when you're arguing with each other. Flip that around. You decide what works for you and your spouse, but then start building back up those relationships. And if you're not married, this is a great way to start getting to know people in general. Most people, when asked a question, actually aren't listening. They are waiting for their opportunity to speak next. When you become an effective communicator and you're able to actually listen to people, zip it, lock in, mindfully think about what they're saying, process their information, this is how you become a great leader as well. When someone is talking, rather than waiting to jump in and correct them or waiting to jump in to find out how you can kind of solve the problem or help them see your way, actually listen to what they're saying. Oftentimes what happens is they will, in the process of speaking, reveal to you things they didn't even know they were revealing and help you be able to take your team to deeper levels because now you're able to listen in a way that helps people to talk. That is probably one of the most powerful things I can leave with you as far as this social rest. Most people within companies do not feel heard. And when they speak, they do not feel that what they said has been understood. And so being an effective listener can transition that, actually make people feel engaged, actually turn team members into advocates because now they feel like they are part of something bigger. They feel engaged, they feel connected. And this is how we have to start growing people out of burnout. You grow people out of burnout, not just with the self-care, which is a huge part of it. You know, I love the self-care, but it's the people care. It's getting the people within your company to be healthy and well in every area. And so that they grow together and you grow together as a team. Now, the last two types of rest we're going to hit on is spiritual rest and creative rest. Now, spiritual rest, I don't go very deep into because I have my spiritual belief. You have your spiritual belief. I'm not trying to turn you into mine and don't try to turn me into yours. We're going to respect each other is how that's going to work. But this is the thing. We all need spiritual rest. And what spiritual rest boils down to is just the need to feel accepted, to feel like you belong, to feel like you're part of something bigger, to feel like you're contributing to the greater good. And so whatever that looks like to you, you're needing part of that to be something that you are restoring because it gets under stress, it gets under fire. And so you need to be mindful of how you're going to restore in those areas. And before I forget to say this, notice when I talk about rest, oftentimes I'm talking about restorative activities. I'm not talking about the cessation of activity. I'm not talking about stopping. I'm not talking about quitting or giving something up. I'm talking about things that pour back in to the places where you are daily pouring out. Now, the final type of rest is creative rest. And I want you to take a moment to take a look at this. Most of the people who experience creative rest experience it around bodies of water. And creative rest is simply this. It's the rest you experience when you allow yourself to appreciate beauty in whatever form. That could be natural beauty, like the oceans, the beach, the mountains, trees, forests, flowers, or it could be man-made beauty, like artwork or music or dance or theater. You get to choose what inspires you, what awakens awe in you. Now, when I talk about creative rest, oftentimes people will say, well, I don't pour out creatively. I'm not an artist or a musician or, writer or anything like that. But this is the thing. If you solve problems, if you have to be innovative, if you have to think outside of the box, if you're anyone in marketing or graphics or design or outreach, you're using creative energy, and that needs to be restored. One of the top areas of deficit that I find within many companies is a lack of creative rest. That's when companies stall out because no one's coming up with any great new ideas because everybody's creative juices are at a low. Simple ways of getting more creative rest, because let's be honest, most of us do not live anywhere near a beach. And I just love to hear in the chat from many of you, you probably already have recognized that there are some places where you just feel restored. You couldn't identify what that was. You just know, I feel better when I visit or do this. What are some of your creative rest places? What are some ways that you actually restore back up your creativity? Share that with us in the chat. Now, if you're someone who noticed that you do get it at the beach and you don't live near a beach, when we looked at the research, it was extraordinary the effects. When we looked at people who said that, yes, the water's my place. We did MRIs of the brain when they were looking at actual water, the MRIs of the brain when they were looking at pictures of water like you are right now, then MRIs of the brain when they were looking at colors that represented the water. The teals, the blues, the aquamarines, the brain's response was the same in those people. So that's the great thing. That's the great news. You don't have to go to the beach to get the effect. What this means is change the lock screen on your computer. That backdrop to that Zoom meeting, whenever I meet with my team, because I know about 70% is the national average of people, their pot is water. I put a back screen of water. I send the same picture to my whole team. And I'm like, okay, let's go on, because this gets us all revved up and in a calm place where we can get deep into our emotional and our tactics and all the different things we need to do. You can choose just a color, a solid color that's in a blue or a teal. You get to choose. If your not emotional, but if your creative rest actually comes from something like flowers, you don't have to go outside. Bring the creative rest inside. Bring cut flowers into your home. If your creative rest is art, bring art inside of your workplace. Have a beautiful picture that you bring in that helps inspire and encourage you. Put that as the backdrop on your computer screens or your phone. So many different ways of incorporating that are very simple. Simple tactics for building in some of these restorative rest components. And oftentimes people will tell me, well, I love music and I listen to music all the time. And so isn't that getting enough creative rest? Well, if music is how you get creative rest, you have to actually decide, because this is the thing. Restorative activities should leave you feeling better after them than before you started them. That's how you know something got restored. That's why when someone tells me, well, I rested on the weekend, and what they mean is they laid on the couch and watched like 15 series of Breaking Bad on Netflix. I'm like, well, what felt better? Well, nothing. My back was stiff when I got up. Exactly. You ceased your normal workday activities, but you actually didn't really rest. You didn't actually restore in any specific area. It's an intentional process of restoration and just really being mindful about where you are pouring back in and what needs to be poured back into. So now that I've shared with you these 7 different types of rest, I'd love to just have you kind of type over into the comments, which of these 7 do you feel like is the one you need most right now? Which one do you feel like is probably depleted and could really use some revving up to be able to get to a better place, and that you could tell you would feel better if you could experience more rest in these areas? Also, over in the Q&A, feel free to start typing in some questions there as well, and we'll jump into some of those. I'm going to take a quick look at the chat to see what you guys are saying. Mental and sensory. And before I forget, I've mentioned about music. For that person, what I actually had them do was turn the music off on their drive home. They did listen to music all day long, all the time, the whole time at their office. They had background music going on. And so that particular person, every time that they left the office and got home, they're like, why do I feel so wound up? I'm listening to this calming music all day long. Why am I so wound up? Because you're sensory overloaded. Your calming music has now crossed the line from calming music to sensory overload because it was nonstop. And at that point, the drive home needed to be a sanctuary of silence, because that actually was the rest that that person needed. You know, rest is so individualized. It's so specific, and it changes based on what you're doing and the things you're engaging with. It changes with whatever stressors that are coming at you. It changes with the people that you're engaging with. All of these things are a constant reevaluation. It's a bit of being your own physician, kind of self-diagnosing. What kind of tired am I? Where am I depleted? And what am I going to do about it? What are some small steps that I can take today to start pouring back in? And no, you don't have to hit all 7 at one time. And I actually don't recommend that. What I recommend is finding that one area that is your greatest deficit. You begin with that one area, doing some simple things there first, restore that area. Then that gives you more energy and strength to address another area. And you keep going that way. If you find that you have a difficult time evaluating which type of rest you're most deficient in, I do have a free assessment at restquiz.com, and it's Takes about 5 minutes. I'm not going to lie. It's an intensive assessment, but what it does, it actually gives you a score on all 7 types of rest, so you can see where you fall within each type of rest. And that way you actually have an idea. Now, keep in mind, this is an assessment. You can't fail it. I've got an email to say, I failed the quiz. You can't fail the quiz. It's to let you know your starting point so that you have something to work with. And then also keep in mind that there are some people that tend to just have higher stress careers. There are some jobs that are just more stressful than others. And if you happen to be in one of those jobs, don't expect your score to be 10, 10, 10 across the board. You may have, 20s across the board and then 130. Address the 30, and then the ones that are lower, you already have some good tactics in place. Maybe pick up 1 or 2 more as time goes on to keep those areas even better recovered. Well, I hope you guys have some great questions. I'll look for Vicki to come back on and we can jump back in and see what you guys would like to chat about.
Dr. Saundra, thank you for your presentation today. It was awesome. I'm over here taking notes. I have your book. I've taken the assessment, but I learned so much today. So we do have several questions.
Okay.
So out of all the types of rest, is there one that you find is more important, or is it truly trying to balance all 7 types?
For each person, there will be one that is most important, but it's individualized. I'll give an example. If you're a counselor, and as a counselor, you're dealing with other people's emotions, you're taking on a lot of emotional stress and labor because you're having to take all of that in. And so for you may actually have a greater need for emotional rest because that is where you're doing the heavy lifting. You're a construction worker, you might have more physical labor that you're taking in. And so that may be an area that you have to think about. Am I stretching the physical part of me that I'm expending so much energy in? If you're a heavy thinker, you spend all day thinking, processing, evaluating, then mental rest would be the area that you likely would need to focus your attention on. It's whatever place you're pouring out the most and not actively restoring.
Got it. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. All right, so the next 2 questions kind of go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. So tips for convincing leadership that companies need these types of rest throughout their day, and then how do you actually sprinkle it in for your employees, or encourage your coworkers or your colleagues to sprinkle in these different types of rest?
Yes, well, I think some of the greatest ways of doing that is really looking at some of the research. That's the big process that I tend to kind of walk companies through. When we look at, where are most of your claims coming out with your health plans? Are they coming out of back pain? And, are that the number one thing that people are complaining about? Doing some audits and assessments to find out where are the places that there is a disconnect. Are you noticing that people are not really feeling as if they are able to concentrate well? That usually kind of boils back to a mental rest deficit. Are you noticing that people are having more difficulty with the creative process? So wherever we see that there's kind of a lull in the ability for the company to move forward, then addressing the deficits in that specific area. And some of the things that we mentioned are really simple tactics. It's just people aren't aware that it's something that they can even do. And there's so many more than the ones that I shared with you. Some of the ones, let's say if it's a company where everyone's at a desk job, so to speak, evaluating how many people are within that are even mentioning that they're having more carpal tunnel in the evening, or they're leaving work with body pain anywhere. Kind of making some of those quick adjustments, because the thing is, if someone is starting to get pain every day at 2 o'clock and they're working to 5 o'clock, I can guarantee you the work that they're providing from 2 to 5 is not the same work that they provided from 8 to 12. And so what are some things that we could inject in the day, even if it's just small exercises, hand exercises that pop up and kind of walk people through something like that. Just so many different tactics that can be incorporated that are simple. Eye strain, that's another one that we're getting a lot with IT. A lot of people complaining of head and eye and head aches and pains. Just some simple eye exercises that are done sitting at your computer, just with how you gaze and where you're looking and the way it pulls on your eye muscles. and how it relieves stress behind the eyes and actually prevents headaches. So it's not that it's like rocket science, it's just people aren't aware. And so when you make someone aware of a way to relieve pain and discomfort that they're having, you can build that into a very simple habit that can then actually help them move forward.
Love it. Thank you for sharing. So we've got a question around volunteering. So does volunteering or doing things for other help contribute to restorative rest?
Absolutely. And that's a great point because, when we talk about restorative activities, it's kind of counterintuitive sometimes in the ways that we're talking about it. So volunteering, you're actively doing something, but because with spiritual rest has to do with belonging and kind of giving back to the greater good, feeling interconnected with people. Volunteering is how some people experience spiritual rest. So they may not experience through a faith-based type system, but they experience it through other ways. And so that could be through volunteering and many other ways. Support groups, a lot of ways that people pour back in and kind of help others.
Awesome. All right. So what is the best practice for employers to meet the rest needs of employees, recognizing that individuals have different areas of rest to focus on? Would you recommend they take the assessment and then provide some practical tips? What other things could they do to help?
The number one thing that I'm finding is really looking at what are the changes that your employees are going through, because there are some rest deficits that you can automatically expect people to be experiencing based on the stress that they're living through. So if I'm working with a company that has an ongoing acquisitions, merger type situation, or a company, which is very common, change in leadership, new CEO steps into office, everybody's stress levels up because there's a level of uncertainty about exactly what's moving forward. And so you already recognize that. You already know that that is kind of an emotion that they're going to be addressing. And so you prep them for it so that before they get into that situation and their stress response kicks off. And we didn't go over this just because of time, but one of the things I love doing with people is what we call a resilience assessment. It's a resilience score that we work with and kind of give people, because sometimes the problem is we don't really recognize our current resilience level. And without knowing that, you may already be susceptible to a certain type of stress because your resilience level has not been built up over time. And so sometimes that can be a very great way of beginning. Have your employees do a resilience assessment to find out how resilient are they. And then if you see that you have 60% of your employees have a low to moderate resilience score, what you then do is now when this new CEO or acquisitions or whatever it is that happened comes in, that there's going to be 60% of your employees that are going to get hit. In other words, they're going to have a little bit of a suppression of their productivity and of their ability to engage, because now they are dealing with their own stress response from that. So rather than wait for that to happen, you get proactive and you actually do the resilience training and the change management assessments and trainings before the merger and the changes.
Great. All right. I can't help but ask one more question, and it's from me. So
Okay.
Can you touch on the typical rest solutions that most people think work, but they really don't? And you mentioned it early on in the presentation. So we all think vacation. That's what I really need to rest. So can you just touch on that for us?
Absolutely. That's the thing. When I burned out, I was doing all those things. I was getting 8 hours of sleep. I was taking my PTO days, and all those are good. That's nothing wrong with that. But what we all know is you go on the vacation, you actually come back more exhausted, because what you do on vacation is not actually oftentimes restorative activities. You're doing fun work away from home. So you're doing things that are engaging, you're doing things that you enjoy, but it's not actually restoring where you're pouring out at work. It's not actually restoring the places that have gotten depleted. And, just to kind of add to that, one of the main questions I'm often asked is, well, I feel like I'm resting after I run. And it's like, how can that be? I'm running, so I'm physically active, but I feel like I get rest. I feel better. And that's the thing. I need people to disassociate the activities and rest and kind of look at it completely different, because running is a physically active activity. And so for someone who maybe is working at a desk job and they're mentally kind of processing a lot of information on the computer, then they go for a run and they feel restored. What's happened? Physically all day they're sitting. So they're not expending energy all day while they're sitting physically. So the run isn't like pouring out of an empty place. They already are full physically as far as that aspect. But mentally, when you're running, your mind actually can go to a quiet place. You're concentrating on your breathing. You're concentrating on your cadence. You're actually doing mindfulness in the process of running that shuts down the mental process that you're not able to shut down when you're at work. Do you see how that connection works?
Oh, I absolutely do. Yes.
It's a complete mindset shift of how we've looked at it in the past. And it's actually the only way we can manage stress, because we can't control it. We can't control it. So take the vacations, take the PTO, do all those things, but don't think that's going to keep you from getting burned out. There's lots of burned out people who use all their PTO days.
Awesome. All right. One last question. Where can we take the resilience test?
Well, that's something that there isn't a way. That's a great question. There isn't a way to take it. It's something I oftentimes give during a training. So that's a great question. I didn't actually think about that. I'm sure you could probably look one up online. There's probably some online somewhere.
I'm sure you probably can. Well, Dr. Saundra, I could talk to you literally all day long. I do think, though, that we're going to have to wrap it up. This presentation was just so timely, so appreciated. We are so grateful that you could join us today. Look at all the clapping hands. Everybody is just loving this topic, and we just really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Thank you. So Cassie is going to join us on stage for some wrap up.
Bit of delay here with the camera microphone situation. Thank you again, Dr. Saundra. That was awesome. And we just had so much fun this week. Really excited to end our week with some more raffle prizes. But before we do that, we have many, many thanks to give. And that is first to our speakers, Dr. Saundra, Jen Arnold, and Billy Blanks, and then our panelists from yesterday. And then also a huge thank you to our sponsors, to our title sponsor, Florida Blue, and all of our sponsors each day this week. You all really make this conference possible, and it's been so fun to virtually see everyone and be able to interact. And we also have a new award this year. It is the conference MVP, and that is our meeting pro, Kristen Thompson. She's behind the scenes. You guys haven't seen her, but if you ever need an event, a meeting, virtually or on site, Kristen is your girl. She seriously helped us with everything behind the scenes, and I think it went pretty smoothly. And if we had been in charge of that, it may not have. So thank you again, Kristen. We really appreciate it. All right. And also thank you to the board. We all work together as a team. There's not a single person that put in more work than someone else. And it's truly a pleasure working with this group of people. It's just been really awesome. So thank you guys so much for all of your work this week. And for all of you, one last ask that we do have is to complete our conference evaluation survey. This means so much to us. When you complete it, we want to hear your feedback and really tailor our programs, our offerings, our events to you all and what you all would like to see. So if you get a chance, it looks like Rachel just dropped the link into the chat. If you'd please complete our evaluation survey, we would greatly appreciate it. All right, so now I guess it is time for our raffle prizes. Let's end on a high note of giving away some fun stuff. Today we have a gift card to the local restaurant of your choice, sponsored by Highland. Vicki, who is our winner of the raffle for the gift card today?
Kim Sandmeyer.
All right, Kim. Congratulations. And then we also have one more Fresh Jack's Organic Spice gift set sponsored by Fresh Jack's Organic Spices to give away. And I was at the table with our treasurer, Reese, earlier today, and she reminded me that when you purchase a spice set from Fresh Jack's, they donate a meal to a child in need. And you can donate to someone in need locally, in our community, nationally, or globally. So that is a really, really cool way to give back and also enjoy delicious spices. Vicki, who is our winner of the spice set today?
Megan Nimri.
All right, Megan. Wonderful. I wish we had like a drum roll sound effect. We're going to have to request that they add that to this platform. Thank you all so much again. We will keep the doors open for another 30 minutes if you'd like to network and connect. And just thank you all so much for an awesome conference. This has been really great. Hope to see you all in person again soon.